If you see anyone popping bottles of champagne outside, inside the building, it's probably Baer Tierkel, because his company was just acquired by AOL Huffington Post Media Group. Baer, congratulations. Make your way to the stage. And let's get this thing rolling.
So we're talking today about entrepreneurial communities. And it's such a beautiful spot. We're going to do it very informally. Just have a conversation in the Victorian salon. It's going to be hooky and it's going to be funky. It already has been hooky and funky. Welcome to Holyoke. Up on the screen you'll see some entrepreneurs. And the thing that I realize as we sit in these buildings, these 150-year-old buildings, is that we aren't the first entrepreneurs to come through here. That Holyoke and this region's been alive with entrepreneurs for hundreds of years. These buildings represent what they call the innovation district of Holyoke. And that district 150 years ago was innovating and coming up with new products and coming up with new ideas. The infrastructure was a little different. Back then, you went to work at 6 a.m., you had breakfast at your desk, you worked, you had lunch in the factory, you worked, you had dinner at the factory, you got home at 9 p.m. And the thing that occurred to me is that nothing really has changed. That sounds like an entrepreneur lifestyle that we in this room have been following for a while. The thing that has changed is the physical infrastructure that's required. Back then, of course, the focus was on factories and physical plant, and people were really the commodity. Cheap labor, was the commodity. People who came to work each day were paid very low wages, put in the same amount of hours that we put in, but the investment in the people was very different. That model has changed. Today, you can start a company with a laptop and a good supply of Red Bull and be very, very successful and get to market. The capital requirements are very low. The physical plant that you need is very small. Literally with a laptop and literally with Red Bull, you can get to market. Some of the companies that I've started around here, Otalo, our vacation rental search engine, is a company, again, started with less than $50,000 in capital, and it is a worldwide website, and the entire infrastructure is run in the cloud. We literally are running this company off of 2 laptops, and that's because all of the infrastructure we need is being delivered to us by Amazon, in our case. Localocracy, which is a company that with a couple of young UMass students we started, again, run in the cloud at a company called Heroku, which was just acquired by Salesforce.com, providing all the infrastructure. In the case of the Localocracy team, you had 2 folks who, not only did they not have offices, but they didn't even have apartments. And yet they're running a website that is powering parts of the Boston Globe and other large media properties around the country. So the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure you need really is nothing anymore. You have companies like Amazon and Heroku who are delivering it for you. The focus of capital today is on the people. And it's really shifted because machines are cheap, bandwidth is getting cheaper, and the focus is on the people. It's all about the people. Now you really need smart people to use those machines. And that's really where the investment is going. If you look at the investment and where capital is going, it's really in finding the entrepreneurs, it's finding the smart engineers, it's finding the mentors that are going to help these people become strong business people. That's the focus of capital today. That's what's driving innovation. Those people need community. Because now, literally, when I'm working in my software startups, it's literally a couple of folks in a cafe running a company. And you can be isolated very easily. No longer are you in a division of a larger company trying to innovate. You're out on your own trying to innovate. And that's why communities become so important, so that you can find other people to bounce ideas off of, so you can find other people to think with, other people to play with, other people to help you come up and innovate. so that you can find mentors out there that will help you, because they're not all going to be in the organizational structure that we've traditionally known. They're all going to be out in the community. And so it's become more and more important to bring that community together. That's one of the reasons why college towns are so great for launching new co's out of. Because you've got the youth, and the youth is really core to the entrepreneurial community. The youth are creating their own jobs today. They're not waiting on the rest of the world to create jobs. They're creating their own jobs. The localocracy team, two UMass seniors, 20 years old, had a great idea. We joined together, we created a company. They created their own jobs and jobs for their friends. And we're able to execute and build that community with other entrepreneurs bouncing ideas. Hey, I need some help on this UI. Hey, I need some help on this marketing plan. That helps happening in the cafes. That helps happening in the work jellies. You're sitting on somebody's couch. Boston, Providence, Boulder, Amherst, these college towns are really fertile for new ideas. The question is, and this is something we'll talk about on the panel, where does the role of government come in? Where does the role of the local government? What kind of infrastructure do you need? You need fast fiber in the software industry. Open space here, there's a great fiber connection coming in here, so it's a wonderful place to work. Shared and flexible office space. Like I said, we've started these companies, and people don't even have apartments, much less offices. You're working in the cafes. You're working on people's couches. You need places with a lot of caffeine, Zoning for caffeine is critical for the entrepreneurial community. There's different things like hackathons. These are some hackathon logos that have come up. Hackathons are great for programmers. It's a place where you literally get together in some space and you program for a 24-hour period, straight. Sounds fun, huh? It is fun. It's a blast for people who love to do that. It's a blast because you're sitting there and you feel the energy of all these ideas around you. You're building this community. You're sharing ideas. Literally, instead of competing against people, you're collaborating. It used to be that, hey, you started a business and, how many NDAs have you signed in your life? I don't sign NDAs anymore. NDAs really are useless because it's really not the idea, it's the execution on the idea that you've got to focus on. The key is executing, and building these communities is key to executing. Collaborating with other people around you raises the ship. It raises those ideas so that they can execute more and stronger. Hackathons, work jellies. Does anybody know what a work jelly is? Amit Gupta in New York, he formed work jellies because in New York it's hard to find office space for less than any money that you have in your pocket. And cafes start getting tired if you're setting up 5 or 6 people in their cafes all day, every day. So work jellies are, if you happen to have an apartment, invite other entrepreneurs over and work in your apartment. And you post it online and you say, hey, I'm doing a jelly today. Everybody come on over. And other entrepreneurs in the area will come over and use your Wi-Fi, and you'll sit around the common dining room table and you'll program and you'll work on your business plan and you'll think and you'll spread ideas and you'll bounce things off of each other. Again, building that community. Those kind of communication tools, hackathons, food camps, it's really the lifeblood of today's entrepreneurial community. All of this is really to what we're going to talk about on this panel, and that's creating entrepreneurial density, a term that Brad Feld coined a while ago. And that is, you want, as an entrepreneur, you want to be in somewhere where there's high entrepreneurial density. You want to go in and walk into the local Subway or the local cafe and run into 2 or 3 other entrepreneurs. So you're literally standing in line, and literally this happens in Amherst. You're standing in line and you're getting into this large design discussion, and people are pissed off at you because you're arguing SQL syntax instead of making the coffee line go forward. And that's the lifeblood. That's really the excitement. That's the fun when you're surrounded every day from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed with smart people who are challenging your ideas in informal places. You're not going to some stodgy cubicle-centered place anymore. You're going to the cafe. You're going to Open Square. You're going to the local restaurants. You're running into friends. You're running into colleagues. You're coming up with new ideas, and you're doing your designs on napkins. And those are turning into business plans, and those are turning into companies, and those are turning into acquisitions. Creating that community is key to that. It takes leadership in those communities to make that happen. It takes the entrepreneurs to be the leaders to do that. I don't think the money people, I don't think the state government, the city government really can create those communities. It's got to be the entrepreneurs ourselves, the people in this room. We've got to sit down in our communities and create opportunities for each other to bounce off of each other, to create opportunities for us to work together on each of our NUCOs and move them forward and share connections. I can't tell you, and I'm sure everybody in this room has had these great opportunities where they're networking with other people and you get a connection from this person and you pass it on to that person, and all of a sudden maybe there's an acquisition happening or a funding happening or a great key employee that's coming along, all because of that network that you're informally sharing, all because of that community that you're working in. And that is really takes the leadership of us to create hackathons, to create idea mills. Brendan's a great example of that, who, hey, unbelievable set of entrepreneurs in this area, unbelievable infrastructure available, but what's needed is the community to fill these rooms, and that's what's beautiful about things like Idea Mill, is creating that community. It didn't start in Silicon Valley. It started in places like Holyoke, Northampton, Amherst, and it's come in full circle. I moved from Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley sucks. You know, it's one big strip mall. There's a bunch of people hanging out thinking they know more than they really do. It's so much more organic when you get out of the valley, and this valley is really happening, and I'm really proud to be part of it, and we're having a ball with it. So with that, I'd like to bring up our panelists, and we can have a discussion about this. First, I'd like to introduce Shawn Broderick. Shawn, why don't you come on up? Shawn is CEO of Play 140 and a former managing director of Techstars. Techstars is a great example of that community that's happening in Boston and Boulder. I'd like to bring up Anita Brearton. Anita is from Boston and is the founder of Golden Seed and a managing partner there, which is a woman-focused venture fund and angel fund out of Boston. I'd like to bring up Jack Templeton, who is from Providence. And Jack is not only the CEO of Lockify, a very exciting new software startup, by the way, but he's also one of the founders of BetaSpring in Providence, which is an entrepreneurial community there. And I'd like to bring up Dick Frederick. Dick is from Albany, Troy, and he's the founder of the entrepreneurial venture ecosystem out of RPI. He's also CEO of LogicalNet, a ISP in the area. So welcome, folks. Welcome to the salon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm the only one with coffee. I feel bad.
I've already had two, so.
So the question is, the thing that excites me is some of the things that you guys are involved in are really a formalizing of the entrepreneurial communities that are out there. I think an example of that is Techstars, where you have application, as an entrepreneur, you submit applications to join the community, then the community provides infrastructure. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Sure. So Techstars started in 2007 out in Boulder, and basically the program in Boulder was running during the summers. Entrepreneurs would submit applications, they'd get reviewed, interviewed, and so on and so forth, and they were accepting about 3 to 5% of applicants that got in, went through a 3-month accelerator program where everybody was brought together. Again, the community matters, where all of these 10, 12 companies that were selected were brought into one place, many of them not from the local area, and crammed into this hot box for a 3-month period to learn, and get mentored. Baer had mentioned mentors before. It's so incredibly important, and that's what Techstars is all about, mentorship. So Techstars ran in Boulder for 2 years, and then the first expansion, I started the Boston group, Cambridge group, in 2009 and 2010, and then left to get back to my startup roots. And now Techstars is running in Boulder, Boston, twice a year in New York City and Seattle, and has affiliate programs at this point all over the world. And very successful. The funding rate of the startups out of Techstars is something on the order of 75% now, and the acceptance rate is now twice as low as Harvard's. So it's about 1%, 1.2% acceptance rate into the program. And it's been very successful in building the communities in the cities in which it exists. Boulder was a great example of a community that had a lot of smart people. There were a lot of great companies out there, a lot of great engineers out there, but they weren't coming together in the form of an ecosystem for startups. And Techstars really, in the course of 3 years, completely transformed that. And Techstars, in that case, very, very much alone, was able to transform that, and they did a tremendous job, and it's a really cool place now for startups. In Boston, it was different. In Boston, we had an ecosystem. We are/were the number 2, investment area after California, and we had lots of startups and a history of startups. But what we lacked, in my opinion, and I've been doing startups in Boston for about 20 years now, what we lacked was that community at the very, very startup early level, and we lacked a lot of the risk-taking, very early seed investors, or at least they weren't very organized. And I think that over the last 3 years, Boston has been able to achieve some really wonderful returns for the community, Techstars Boston that is, in terms of bringing the entrepreneurs in, many of them, again, from out of state that stay, which is very good for the local ecosystem, and get those people funded and growing successful companies. So, and the same thing is true in Seattle as well, which had a vibrant system. And New York's a slightly different beast because New York's always different. And it's been just a wonderful community building exercise. It's really what drew me to Techstars in the first place. It was an opportunity, A, to put my money where my mouth was, because I'd been bitching and moaning about the state of seed funding in Boston for years and years and years, and B, it was an opportunity to really bring the community much, much closer together, which I think we've achieved. Very, very, very happy about that. And so that's where Techstars fits into the community world.
That's great. Just by the way, where does the majority of the funding from Techstars come from? Is it angels or is it institutional?
I think the majority at this point is institutional.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So, yep.
Anita, so one of the things that kills me is the lack of women in tech, especially in visible. Invisible is kind of the key word, unfortunately. And one of the things you've done, I know, is found the Women's Entrepreneurial Council.
That's correct. So 2 years ago, I took over the leadership of Golden Seeds Boston, which, as you mentioned before, is an angel investment group focused on funding women-led businesses. It's the 4th largest angel group now in the country. So we're making great progress in funding women. But one of the things, in working closely with all the Golden Seeds investors in the ecosystem, one of the things that we very quickly saw was that women don't avail themselves of the ecosystem in the same way that men do. They don't tend to go and seek out the meetups and the support organizations. So when I looked at the ecosystem, I realized there were over 20 organizations in Boston that were dedicated to supporting women as entrepreneurs. But they weren't speaking to one another. They weren't coordinating, and they weren't collaborating. And so last year I founded the Women's Entrepreneurial Council with the mission of bringing these groups together and mapping where we all fit in the ecosystem, making sure that we're not doing events on top of one another, supporting each other's events, and helping bring women into the ecosystem so that we do create more women entrepreneurs.
What can organizations as entrepreneurs out in communities are putting together events and collaboration organizations, what can we do to try to drive and attract more women into these events and organizations?
I think that's a good question. I do believe, I hate to say it, but I do believe that we need some women-focused events as starting points, because women do tend to feel more comfortable starting there. And then it is anything that we can do to show women the ecosystem and push them out into the ecosystem. There's a great group in Boston called the SheEOs, which is a group for women CEOs. And the wonderful thing about that group is that they have women in the group that are running $100 million businesses, and then they have women that are at business plan formulation. And the idea is that they learn from one another. I think of the 100 members they've got, I've probably sent 50 of them to that group. And once, one of the things that we see is that once they start and enter the ecosystem, then they get very aggressive in the ecosystem, which is great. So Mass Challenge, which is a big competition every year, there were much more women involved in that this year. So that was great to see.
Yeah, I was very surprised actually and heartened at Mass Challenge. Local, actually, we were part of Mass Challenge, and walking around the 13th floor down on Fan Pier, it seemed not quite 50-50 women, men, but certainly closer than I've ever seen it. By the way, how many people are aware of Mass Challenge? About half. Mass Challenge is an awesome program that's funded by the state and is focused on entrepreneurs and provides infrastructure in Boston in a very large empty building on Fan Pier.
Nice empty.
A gorgeous, spectacular empty building overlooking the harbor for free for entrepreneurs, and it's great infrastructure because there's no walls. It's a massive space, and you're literally walking around bumping into entrepreneurs, and the collaboration that goes on in that environment is just unbelievable. So Jack, Providence, tell us about Providence and Beta Spring and the network there.
So I moved to Providence just about 6 years ago. I'd been in New York City for about 10 years, and it was really the best thing I ever did. It's an incredible city, a fantastic scale, and when I moved there, I met a whole bunch of folks who also had moved in from different places, a lot of them startup hubs, who wanted something more human scale and recognized that Providence, while it didn't yet have a startup tech ecosystem, that there was quite a bit of potential for it. And so the group of us just started doing a variety of things. We started a geek dinner, a monthly Providence Geeks dinner where everyone would just get together, all the techies, at a local arts organization actually, and that's become a very large event. I teamed up with actually one of my colleagues here today, Melissa Withers. She was at the Economic Development Corporation. We started an extensive website to track everything that was happening. With another friend and colleague, Alan Tier, who's here, we started Open Coffee. And all these people just started coming to these things and then seeing each other, week after week at these different things, and there really started to be a community that gelled. And then Alan and Owen really took things to the next level. Owen Johnson is the third partner in Beta Spring, and they're the managing partners, and really pushed to have a Techstars style accelerator based in Providence. And we've done that quite successfully. We're about to go to do it twice a year. We're adding tracks for physical computing, 3D printing, fabrication, things like that, as well as video games. And I do want to say that Shawn was very supportive. He was at Techstars at the time, and really, being in Boston, he was very supportive of us as we started this. Thank you for that. So I think today we have, it's still nascent, but there's definitely a tech scene you can point to. It has its own character. I would say there's a lot of camaraderie. People are very supportive, not very competitive, at least not yet. I worry sometimes as the talent war gets more and more intense.
Internally?
Internally, yeah. Much more supportive than some scenes I've been aware of. And I spent, again, a lot of time in New York, which was different for Internet 1.0. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. And Dick, Albany, Troy, which is probably the area that I'm least familiar with, but RPI, you've got the academics happening out there. Tell us about EVE and how that works.
Well, it's interesting because when I was driving over here today, I was thinking about some of the differences, and as you drive through our communities, we see a lot of very similarities. I have a lot of opportunity in real estate that currently is vacant. We're trying to find ways to energize this, and one of the difficulties we've had in the Albany region for a long time is we actually have 4 competing communities. We have Schenectady, which is the home of GE. We have Albany proper, which is a capital of New York State. The city of Troy, which is an academic center for the most part, and a dying industrial environment. Probably very similar to what I see here. Much of the industry that was formed there was in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It died off. A lot of vacant buildings that we're trying to resurrect. And then we have Saratoga. And each one of those communities kind of competes for resources in terms of dollars, people, and it really has become, unfortunately, very divisive. And so for a long time, we've been trying to work at the community level to bring together our individuals to start to work together. And RPI had the first business incubator, university-based incubator in the country. It was formed in 1980. In 2010, we moved that away from a brick and mortar model to a virtual model. And one of the reasons we did that is we really wanted to move off the academic campus and bring our incubation back down into the community. And in doing that, what we've seen is that there's a tremendous response to that because now the focus is more on creating businesses and following that with creating, obviously, jobs. And so we've built a fairly large mentoring network with our alums as well as local business enterprise. Our IDAs, our economic development organizations, have contributed some funding that allows us to help start some of these companies in our local areas. And our goal really is to fill the vacant buildings in our community and at the same time to build some real value into the business fabric that we have. And so it's a heritage that's tied to the university. We do have access to all the research facilities. I can use any of the facility on campus, the wind tunnels, the lab space, and anything that I want in order to help businesses incubate. So we can give them access to pretty high-end technical equipment that they couldn't otherwise purchase on their own, don't necessarily need it full-time. So we're trying to leverage the values that are available in our community. We also have 23 colleges and universities beyond RPI in our geographic community, and we're working together to try to leverage those various resources for all the companies that we incubate within our community.
That's great. So that kind of brings me to a question for everybody, and feel free to jump in, is, to what extent do you get involved with the local government? And, I throw education somewhat under that umbrella as well. There's large institutions, whether they be city, state, federal, and these academic organizations. And sometimes I know, as an entrepreneur, sometimes I feel those are a hindrance, sometimes they're a help. It really can be a double-edged sword. What are your experiences with the organizations that you're working with?
Okay, well, I'll start. So my perspective is from a funding perspective. So one of the things that I've just done is join the board of the Mass Technology Development Council, which is the state venture fund. And we're currently looking at the strategic mission of that group and looking to where the state can help with funding, catalyze entrepreneurship. And so I think that's a very interesting model. And then I think wearing my other hat, my angel investing hat, I also sit on the board of the Angel Capital Association, and we have a public policy committee that is actively working with state governments to look at things like angel tax credits to encourage more people to become angel investors, to bring more capital into the various economies around the country.
So let me throw two things out. The first is that in my experience, the level of involvement that can be brought to bear for good by the government and local universities is a function of the maturity of that ecosystem. So in Boston, the answer was not much. In fact, we tried to work with the city of Cambridge regarding some empty schools they had, about using some spaces and things like that. The city of Boston has been a bit more welcoming to Techstars than Cambridge has, but that's a pretty mature ecosystem. And I bet in some less mature ecosystems, they've gotten some good response, and I'll let others speak to that. The second thing is that, I don't want to sound like I have a strong opinion, but I've got a strong opinion that, governments need to just stay the fuck out of the way, and not to put too fine a point on it. And with the exception of, the tax law and things like tax credits, I don't think there's a whole lot they can really do, because government and startups are anathema. It's oil and water. There's really not a lot of overlap, but that's just my opinion.
But how do you really feel?
Yeah,
It's interesting that you say that, Shawn. In New York State, the governor recently introduced something called Open for Business. I read an article a couple weeks ago, and somebody said to me, I didn't realize that New York State was actually closed. But at the end of the day, the purpose is really to try to accelerate growth and to consolidate the funding mechanisms that are available within the state and make it easier for companies to find funding through government sources. And one of the interesting comments that came out of these study groups, and it's regional economic development councils that the government formed, he has 10 of them, they're vying for $200 million in funding, was that almost without exception, every one of the groups came back and said if the government got out of the way, we could do our business a lot easier. And I think that I see a lot of head shaking, and if you're involved in getting businesses started, I know Massachusetts has a lot of regulations, as does New York State. The regulations really become counterproductive in many ways to getting these companies launched. And so we've been working hard with our government entities to have them back off on some of the regulatory requirements that are really onerous for very early stage companies. In many instances, they don't even have any application, but they certainly become a stumbling block for those companies to get launched. And on the other hand, we have local industrial development agencies that have funding that is within the county. It's provided through some state funding, and they've been very helpful. In Rensselaer County, they established a $100,000 fund that I can tap into whenever I have a startup company move into the city of Troy. I can give them a grant. It's written for 3 years. If the company stays for the full 3 years, it's forgiven. If they leave, it's prorated. But they can use that to buy things like computers, office equipment, and other things that they might need to get their businesses started. And so I think there's a purpose there. You have to find the right players. Not everybody wants to play that way. And of course, you always get some kind of negative feedback because people are saying, well, why do we give money away for free to businesses when they should be out earning it? But there is definite value. And so I subscribe to the fact that we should play cautiously with government, but I do think that they're starting to recognize that they need to stand back a little bit and kind of let us move our businesses in the direction they need to move.
It's interesting. One of the companies that I'm involved with is Crosscut Media, a startup out of Amherst. Mark Buccarelli, CEO, is here today. And, one of the things we discovered was National Science Foundation grants. And we got one of those, and that's been tremendously helpful. And it's something that was a black box to me in that I had never really thought of public financing available for entrepreneurs. But the money is there, and it's kind of crazy to leave it there and not leverage it as much as you can.
We just actually hosted an SBIR training session yesterday. A great opportunity. There's a couple of $1 billion sitting in the government coffers that are provided for a lot of innovative technology, and it comes through almost any agency in the government. It's not all that difficult to get, and it's not equity, it's a gift. $150,000 on phase 1 and up to $1 million on phase 2. Many companies around New York State have taken advantage of it. In fact, we had a list yesterday of the companies that had in the capital region achieved funding, and one of them had gotten $17 million over the last 5 or 6 years from the federal government. All equity-free money that's used to further develop their technology and allow them to launch their business.
It's another question of whether the government should actually have that money, but
Right.
if it's there, we should take advantage of
Right.
it. So let's talk about these entrepreneurial communities and the potential for competition versus collaboration. I think, Jack, you mentioned it. When you bring the entrepreneurs together, I find, the thing that really is amazing about these communities is the collaboration that goes on. And it's great to hear about the collaboration between the communities, from Techstars helping Beta Springs start up. 20 years ago, the mentality of executives was really not in this space. And you really kept your ideas very private. You kept your plans very private. You didn't share. And that mantra has completely changed. I mean, as an executive out there, I find unbelievable value in this room and talking to everybody in this room and sharing ideas with the people in this room, in that it improves the idea substantially. How do you foster in your communities that collaboration and trying to keep out the competitiveness?
I think it's there naturally to begin with, and then it's just when resources get very scarce, and it's usually around talent, that things start to change a bit, and they get personal because you took this person from my company or whatever. I hope we, Providence and Holyoke don't really have to be worrying about this yet, and especially I think in living in a place like Holyoke or Providence, you've sort of made some sort of commitment to the community. You know, you're not in the rat race that is some of these places. Could I just have to say, you know, and Baer, you've been incredibly generous saying, you know, plug Providence and whatever, but a couple things. One, Providence is amazing. Beta Spring applications are open. I have to, though, talk about sitting in this mill at this moment. My co-founder and brother, Chris, who is stealing electricity in the back row there, of Lockify, he lives in Northampton, so I've been coming up here for years. And every other time I come over here, and whether I'm with someone and showing it them for the first time, or I'm driving around myself, yeah, I'm that guy, going around myself, I am checking out these mills because I'm a casual student of mills, and this is the most extraordinary complex there is. And I just have to say something. It's incredible. And the density, and that you have 100,000 students within, what is it, a 20-mile radius, it's unbelievable. And so I would just, I just want to say, you're not kidding yourselves in terms of whatever this asset. It's remarkable, and as Seth Godin says, you know, that's half the battle. You know, the more people that see this, they will remember it, talk about it, and whatnot. And then the other thing I would say is be sure you just keep it weird, keep it gritty, party here. You know, don't let this get too cleaned up or anything. But I just have to say again, coming here for a decade now, wow, it is something. And
if I can just add to that, how many people here are over the age of 25? So, you know, that many years ago, this was East Cambridge. This was East Cambridge. I mean, East Cambridge was like linen mills and rope factories, and you know, I worked there in the late '80s, and this was East Cambridge. Lotus wasn't there yet. Lotus hadn't built their big buildings. None of the biotechs were there. It was a bunch of empty mill space that nobody wanted to live at or work in. And you know, it's really auspicious, and I hope you guys really embrace this and keep it weird is an excellent piece of advice.
It really is true. Should we plug Amherst? No. Each of us plug our little towns. And actually that is the power, is that you've got Amherst, Northampton, Holyoke, Springfield. This whole Connecticut River Valley, and starting in Hanover really, is a great ecosystem unto itself.
Can I throw a thought in there?
Yeah.
Just on that? That's great, and we have similar stuff. Everyone does have similar sort of thing. Density is really important.
It is.
Getting this stuff clustered together so you're bumping into each other, and ideas it's really important. And so the respective communities need to work out how are we going to create density?
And that is a question. I mean, that is not something that tends to happen. There's not a macro planning that occurs, right? And, you know, in each level, like I know around here we have the Regional Technology Council, we've got local, you know, town-based organizations, we've got regional organizations, and I think what we need to make sure of is none of that competes against itself, that it all works together, just as Anita, you were saying how, you know, the different women's organizations in Boston, you might look at them as competing, or you could look at them as collaborating, and they're bringing up together. And I think that's what really needs to happen in these different overlays that occur. And, you know, it's going to happen organically where it's going to happen, whether it be Amherst, Northampton, Holyoke, or hopefully all three, because all three of those have something unique to offer, I find. What keeps startups in your towns? I mean, Boston is big enough to where, you know, you can keep companies there. I know we in this valley have a challenge, and I would imagine Albany and Troy the same thing, maybe Providence to some degree, that there's a sense that once you hit a certain critical mass, you need to be in Boston or New York. And we've had a number of startups that have tried to stick around the valley, but, you know, they couldn't find the right space. The zoning in some of the towns weren't right for some of, you know, specifically in some of the biotech companies. You know, how do we keep our entrepreneurs in our towns?
So I can address that. We've had that question and issue bouncing around for a long time. We used to have two A-round VCs in our area. We don't any longer. We did not have a very vibrant angel investing community. We had an angel network, but it wasn't really effective. And so a little while ago, I went forward with some friends and we created the Eastern New York Angels, which is a funded angel fund that now has money in the bank that we can use to kind of fund these organizations. But as we start to do that and we start to grow, the first concern we have is what happens at the next level, because we don't have that money to come back behind them and put in the 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. And what we've actually seen, which has surprised me a little bit, but I think it's starting to be more of a trend, is that some of the companies that have actually gotten seed funding, and I've had, not seed funding, but A-round funding, and we had 2 examples. One recently got 6 and one recently got 10. Both of those groups got money from out of town, one from Silicon Valley, and the other one from the Midwest, Minnesota. And I think more today, the big money is willing to let the company stay where it is because it's got its roots, it's got its connections, it's got its networks, it's got the foundation there to continue growing that business. And where they can leverage their assets into that company, I think they're more willing to do that than they may have been a few years ago.
Great. How's Providence? Do startups see Providence as having a wall at some point?
It really depends upon the demographic you're talking about. So obviously we have a lot of schools, and retaining the 24-year-old is different than retaining the 34-year-old. With the 24-year-old, and I'm not allowed to say this in Rhode Island, I don't think anymore, but I'll say it out here. So the key is you got to keep them made, paid, and laid. And what we made, by that we mean you get them respected, connected, tied in. Rhode Island's fantastic at that, where everything's 1 degree of separation.
There's a lot of made men in Rhode Island.
Yeah, exactly. Don't even start. We're excellent. Paid is they got to be able to support themselves, so that's about income and investment. And again, making sure that these young people have what they need. And laid is just a crude way of saying, remember they have a social life. That's incredibly important because college builds that in, and once they're out, they're really at danger of losing them, So really, and that's why I said, party in these mills if you aren't already. It's really important. And then at the other side, the place where there's a challenge as well, I think, for everyone. Well, especially for Providence. Our public schools are not what they should be. We're very aware of that. It's going to take years to get them to where we want them. So as soon as people have kids that need to go to primary school, there's a moment there that we can lose them, and we're all working on that. It does mean for us right now that going after the 23-year-old is easier because we've got some runway to get the schools in place for them. But both fronts have to be addressed
And you've
at
got
the
great
same time.
nightclubs, so.
What's that?
Great nightclubs. in
Nightclubs,
Providence,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But to your main part of the question, the reason we'll ultimately win is being in Providence, like so many of these communities, is about really having a life as opposed to just having a career. You make you get tied in all sorts of other ways. I can't say enough for just human scale of relationships and stuff. It's a real advantage, and I don't think we all recognize it enough.
How's that work at Techstars Boulder? I would imagine the same type of thing. You're not in the epicenter of the world.
Yeah, very, very social environment and crazy social environment. And Boulder actually has some pretty good schools. There's the 2 different high schools. One of them's the Stoner High School, and one of them's the Smart Kid High School. And that's how it was explained to me. And so it's in Boulder, it's been incredibly successful in that regard. In Cambridge, I was thinking as Jack was talking, we don't do a very good job. Part of it's our sort of, Puritan ethic, I guess, at having lives. And Techstars in Cambridge is very different than Techstars in Boulder in that regard. There's a lot less a lot of bonding and camaraderie and that sort of fraternity sorority thing, but not so much social, not as much. And it's just a different culture and a different environment. And part of it's the maturity. If you're in Boulder and, in 2008 for 3 months, there's only, 15 startups, and 10 of them are in that building, right? You know, in Boston, you know, there's 12 startups, and there's you know, hundreds around you, so it's different.
That's great. Well, we're just about out of time here, and I wanted to thank our panelists so much for coming out to Holyoke and illuminating us with your experiences. That's great. I'd like to ask everybody in the audience, as a take-home, to really go back into your communities and be one of the entrepreneurial leaders out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Beta Spring or a Techstars or a Golden Seed large organization. Just on your daily basis, you know, you can put together events and create community of the entrepreneurs in your network and make it happen. And it's really all of us that are going out there and creating Ignites and creating jellies and creating food camps and creating free hackathons that are going to really create the community and the momentum for entrepreneurs. So thank you very much.